So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 16th ECSS Symposium. So we have two speakers today. We're going to be starting off with Rachana Ananthakrishnan from University of Chicago, talking about scalable research automation using Globus, and Chenhua Leo Liao from Lawrence Livermore National Lab. They'll build source-to-source tools for high-performance computing. We're going to wait just a minute or so because I see a lot of folks are trickling in. And I also have on the slide at the bottom there the link to the Ecss code of conduct, which applies to all Ecss events. So if you haven't taken a look at that recently, please please take a look. Okay, so we are now at 2 past the hour. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we're now up to 46 participants. Looks like it leveled off. And Rachana, I'm going to hand things over to you. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Bob. So you're able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, hello, everyone. So my name is Rachana, and like Bob said, I work at the University of Chicago, and I have about 30 minutes here, and I'm going to touch on automation solutions using Globus. Right? So very, very quick one-slide intro of Globus. We are a division at the University of Chicago and provide data management services to the research community. Globus, as it's known today, sort of the hosted service, has been in production for over 10 years at this point. And we have core capabilities for data transfer, collaborative data sharing, and several ways for administrators to manage sort of high performance data management, right? We connect at over 1,500 institutions, so there are lots of locations where Globus is deployed. And predominantly, it is used for data transfer and data sharing. But we also see an increasing need and use of Globus for automated tasks. So this talk is going to focus, initially I'll touch on what are the capabilities that are available and how research data task automation is being done today. And then speak more about the work we are doing through an NSF grant. It's year 2 of a 5-year grant for providing larger scale heterogeneous environment automation. So most of you who have used Globus are probably familiar with the service, the hosted service, which means you're either using our web application or our CLI to be able to move data. But from the beginning, we have focused on providing not just software as a service where you could just use the service interface, but also platform, right? Be able to provide a platform for the research ecosystem so you could build on the core capabilities the platform provides for your own domain-specific applications, right? And how do we provide the platform such that the capabilities, the core capabilities that are required in terms of either security or basic data movement tasks can be leveraged, can be used in orchestration for automation, and then sustain. So that's been sort of a dual goal for us, providing a SaaS, software as a service, but also platform as a service. And there are several core platform services that we make available in production today, not just for use for the services Globus provides, but also for use by the research community. So anybody could be using this for their own needs, not just within the Globus transfer or the sharing ecosystem. Some of the core capabilities there are things like identity and access management. So if you're building a portal that needs login capabilities, how do you do federated login, right? So rather than reinvent the wheel, you could be leveraging Globus Auth for providing that capability. For securing your own services, there's Globus Connect and Transfer, which probably most people are familiar with for data transfer, synchronization, and sharing. We also have a search service that has, again, platform capabilities where you can put in metadata for discovery of data and querying also. We also have identifiers in collaboration with data sites. And the flow service is the orchestration piece that I'm going to talk about more today. So given all of our services are provided as a platform, also there is published REST APIs. So essentially you use appropriate interfaces, right? Ad hoc interactions, you can use the web application that Globus ships. You could also use the Globus CLI or directly speak to our REST services to build programmatically on the capabilities we provide and add your own capabilities on top. So I'll touch a little bit on simple automation use cases, and I have simple in air quotes there, but it's just sort of looking at it from the perspective of common ones that we see: data backup, repeated transfers at a particular given time, automatic stage in and stage out of data as a part of a compute job, even more nuanced than the simple version of that would be the scheduler knows that the staging has been completed, and only then it attempts to provide time for the job to be run. You can imagine lots of such automation use cases from within a Science gateway or a portal use case, right? Be able to transfer results for a user, be able to monitor the transfer so it can clean up cache and so on. So I'm categorizing this very roughly as a sort of simple automation use cases. And we see a wide variety of these, and they are very easily solved by using some of the tools that we have. For example, one of them is the Globus CLI. So this is a command line interface. It's a Python only native application that you can download. And it supports both scripting and interactive use. So the scripting use is where the automation comes into play. So we have seen several deployments where the Globus CLI is deployed on the head node. So the user from within their job description language is able to ask for stage in, stage out commands using the CLI, or they have repeated transfers that submit using Globus CLI, right? So the simple sort of single location use cases can be solved by using scripting, or if you wish, using the Python SDK. Then again, very similar idea, where you could write your own application that wraps all these basic constructs, and it worries about the security, the tokens, and the interactions, right? So this has been done for a while now, and there's lots of deployments that use this. For the last year and a half, we've been starting to focus, sorry, before I go there, as much as these are simple use cases, here's one particular example of how powerful it can be. This is from the University of Michigan's Advanced Genomics Score. They have users who come in, obviously provide samples, and they're generating data for these users. And they use Globus to deliver the results coming out of the instrument to their researchers, both in terms of making the data securely available to the researchers, but also making a copy in their long-term archive, right? All of this is programmatically done, largely using the CLI or the SDK, some interaction using the web app for the administrators, but they're able to sort of have processes around this to be able to make this data available, right? So as much as I call these sort of simple use cases, those constructs can be used and are being used in several facilities to be able to do such data delivery or data ingest processes, right? So building on this, we've been starting to look at automation at scale more in heterogeneous environments. So when you see use cases where users are having to cross multiple security environments during the pipeline that it takes for them to process their data, when they have to do different types of actions, right? But some of it is data actions, compute, some of it is even user input, right? Somebody is visually looking at a early reconstruction to say, should they proceed with this data collection or not? So even human in the loop activities, right? So if you think about wanting to be able to automate something of that scale and that nature across heterogeneous environments, you have lots of different things that need to be done at the infrastructure level, be it finding access to those environments, finding the right security tokens, being able to understand how to deploy and operate in those environments and such, right? So for the last year and a half or so, we have been working on building out a hosted solution that can be used by researchers and research computing centers to provide as a solution to the community, for them to be able to build these pipelines and operate it. So the service, the large umbrella, is called Globus Automate, but essentially it provides a flow service which gives you a platform for defining and building these pipelines of tasks, right? So there are some examples of some of the actions we have seen that users have put to work in the last year and a half here. And the flows essentially constitute different actions, and the action really can be anything. It could be, transfer data, check for presence of data, be able to get the right credentials, run a compute job. So whatever you would like, extract metadata, all those are actions. And the flow service lets the user put them in a sequence. We are heavily leveraging Amazon Web Services to build these flows and execute them. And it has a very rich way of describing these things. So the flow that you have could have multiple parallel steps. So you might have step 1, step 2, then 3, 4, and 5 could happen in parallel. You wait for all the results, and then the next thing happens. So you can define these in different ways. It doesn't have to be a strict sequence. The flow, in addition to the flow service, we've also started to provide ways for you to trigger how this happens, right? So for example, the most common trigger in an instrument use case is when a file is written, or when a folder contains n number of files, you have a data set to process. So you could have triggers that then initiate this flow, and the whole processing pipeline happens. And each of these pieces that the flow steps, we call them actions. And there is a clear API that defines an action, and anybody can write action providers, right? So we've sort of made that model extensible. So here is some examples of action providers. There are a few that we have written, obviously, because we have functionality that can be leveraged. For example, there is one on transfer, there is one on search. There's also one on user form, right? And this came out of a use case where one of the steps in the workflow was for a curator to come in and review the metadata and say yes or no in terms of the flow continuing. So there's a user form. So these flows are really not meant to be high throughput jobs, or we're not looking at sort of rapid workflows to execute jobs. They're really meant to be looking at research tasks, which have all kinds of different granularities of performance and different types that can be run, including human in the loop input and potentially computing on a supercomputer, right? So it could be a good mix. So we have a few that we have built and shipped, and then the ones in orange here are ones that other people have written and plugged in because it's specific to sort of their use case, right? So the one here called DL Hub is from a group that is working on some machine learning applications, and they use Automate for building some of these, and they've written their own step there. Another one here, Describe, I think comes from the materials data facility community, which they have their own specific metadata requirements. So they wrote their own step for what that would look like for somebody to describe. So the idea here is that we provide the infrastructure service where you can come and compose these flows, and users can instantiate these flows with different parameters. And if you need to, you could write your own custom action providers that can then be put together as a part of these flows, right? The infrastructure worries about scaling, availability, user credential management, because you could run these flows as a particular user. So then we make sure we prompt the user for the credentials, delegation, and all the security happens. You can run the flow as a system itself, and we have a permission model behind that, right? So the hosted service provides, again, the control plane for how these flows are composed and run. And the actual action provider is the one that is doing the job. And that is running at various places, depending on what is needed, right? So if execution is needed, it's happening on the compute. The web service could be hosted anywhere. So only the control plane is hosted. This has been something that really has sort of pushed the scale at which automation is possible and what sorts of solutions a beamline scientist or an instrument operator or an RCC person is able to provide to their users. So they can compose these flows and the users just instantiate them and run these flows. Right? So next few slides here, I want to try to make this concrete by providing a few examples. And if you can relate to any of these examples, if you have tasks and flows that you're doing that seem to fall under some of these things that I'm describing, then the service could be of value to you. So feel free to reach out to us and we can work with you on getting you access to this, right? And I think I have 4 examples on this. So the first one, given everything that is on top of mind for all of us, COVID research, right? So we are using it in multiple ways, but this is one that I am allowed to speak about. So this one is, they call this project CityCOVID, and it's led by Jonathan Ozek. And what they're really trying to do is model an analysis of capability for the city of Chicago. And the process needs to constantly run because the data is updating. So they want daily updates to the data and the reports that are being produced. And their flow really is scrap all the data from the Chicago reports, perform some simulations for modeling at the leadership class facility at Argonne. And once that is done, they move to another research computing facility, completely different security setup for doing post-processing and then produce reports, right? So you can imagine very disjoint, multiple places you have to do actions. And if you codify their flow, this is what it looks like. You know, write credentials, an action to scrap the data, assimilate, transfer the data, analyze and publish reports, right? And you can see on the right-hand side top corner is sort of the ultimate visualization. So once the report is published, that's how it is being visualized. So this is a very straightforward flow, which uses compute and transfer actions, right? But they're running different things. They're running on machines they want, and credential management is completely taken care of. The second one I'll touch on is this group who's doing serial crystallography at Advanced Photon Source. So previously, when they're trying to collect data like this, they look for large crystals, and there are challenges in terms of creating these large crystals that can be used for experiments. So they're using a new method called serial crystallography, where there is a single chip that has tons of crystals embedded in it, and they just sort of scan and image each of those. And they want to be able to do it in such a way that once they get some n number of samples, they stop and they do QC. Are they getting useful data? Should they continue using the precious beamline time at the Advanced Photon Source for this? And once a QC is done, they either continue collecting the data or adjust the experiment. So they're collecting better data, right? So again, there is a whole collection of data, transfer, QA process, a user in the middle who's looking at some initial reconstruction to say, okay, does this seem reasonable? Should we continue or not? They say yes, continue to transfer the data, full-fledged analysis at a HPC center, visualize it, catalog. So they are pulling metadata out of it and publishing it. And I apologize, the screenshot on the right-hand side here is really small, but this is actually their portal where a user can come and search for the results, and they see thumbnails of the data, and ultimately there is a pointer to the actual data. So the user can search the published results, look at the information, and download the data for further analysis, right? So they have been running this for a while now, and since they started using Globus Automate, they've been able to push through quite more flows, right? They're up to like 300, 400 flows within a very short duration of time. So it has helped them sort of drive efficiency on the beamline time that they spend there. This group is also working on COVID research, and they've put this to use there, but we're just not allowed to share results on that. But again, there has been impact on being able to accelerate and make it more efficient for them on processing the data that is coming out of that machine. And then a third one, very similar instrument use case, and bear with me while I talk about this one, because I'll tie this back why I have a couple of instrument use cases here. But this is a group out of APS again. They use a very different technique, X-ray photon correlation spectroscopy, XPCS. And the goal of this group is to be able to define this flow, which has all the right actions, and ultimately allow the user to subselect the data and run analysis on demand, right? So rather than run the same thing for all users, the Beamline scientist, in working with researchers over the years, has figured out how this thing needs to be analyzed. And most of the researchers who come and gather the data do not have the expertise or the resources to analyze it back in their campus. So they want to be able to provide this as a service where researchers can come in, they can then select their data set and then initiate the flow to perform analysis of choice, right? So similar actions, you can see lots of transfer, run computation and things, but also you can see some interesting things around setting permissions so that the data is accessible only to the user who ran it. The Beamline scientists may run it for them on their allocation, but make subsets of the results available to the user and such. So that's the flow that they want to do. But most importantly, publish this flow so that a user can come in, initiate it with different parameters, and run analysis of their choice, right? So slight variation to what you saw in the previous ones. And then the last one, which is not an instrument one, is from the materials data facility. If you're not familiar with it, they've been around for more than 5 years now, and they provide a rich repository for materials data. They accept data from different researchers with very flexible interfaces. And ultimately, the repository serves as this great place for people to come, either to discover data, to come in and see, if they're doing some research on a particular material, see what else is available, but also importantly to query for analysis, right? And there's a big distinction actually. When you do discovery, you're exploring, you don't need exact results. You're still sort of trying to figure out what's related and ranked searching. When you do queries to gather the data, you want exact results, right? You want to know that the results that are coming out match the pieces that match the parameters that you've put in. So they provide both of those things. But what they need is a flow for users to deposit the data. So what happens when they deposit? Very different sets of things. Extraction of metadata is there. There's a web form where the user is entering things. You see a curator in the mix, again, a person in the middle. There's an identifier that is minted. We use DataCite for that. So they want to be able to run this, and you can imagine this is running in the control plane, and every time a user starts a new publication, a new instance of the flow runs for them. All the error handling is taken care of and such, right? So the examples hopefully give you some concrete idea of how this is being put to use. And tying back to the platform idea, there are 3 ways you can see how this can be used. You could directly use the flow platform. So you could build your own action providers. They're fit for purpose. And what we would be giving you is a action provider development toolkit. So you would write your own custom ones and configure the flow and run it. You could be using what we are working on right now, which is a SaaS-based solution for instrument data management, right? If you saw the instrument flows I showed you, they sort of look similar. And you can see how we can parameterize this, right? So you don't have to write any code or new action providers, but rather you're sort of piecing these things together, right? Here is the order I want. Here is where I want the transfers to happen. Here is the extraction I want to run, or here is the reconstruction I want to run, right? So the action providers are pre-built, and you compose them and configure them, but you do not have to bring in development expertise to run this. A very similar idea with the data management plans, right? So we are taking a platform and saying, can we provide these composable pieces that then you can just run without having to write your own code? The ultimate in all of this is the data management, pipeline runs in the background, and data massaging happens, and analysis and all that happens. But we see a lot of data portals that are being built to ultimately provide the interface to the user, right? How do I discover the data? How do I find access to the data? And we see that as sort of the consuming UI at the end of this. And we've seen quite a bit of success for especially data coming out of instruments, having the flow run in the background to do what it does in terms of getting the data ready, and then a portal for the user to be able to browse and access the data. So I'll stop for questions, and I'll just say, from a status perspective, this is something we have another 3 years funding on. We continue to work. We have active pilots and some production use. So some of the examples I gave you, these were, real production use of the infrastructure, but it's still not generally available. We haven't opened the doors. But if any of this is useful to you, and if you think you have use cases and you would like to work with us on piloting this or testing this out or trying it out in your environment, we would be happy to engage. So reach out to us and let us know. So I'll pause here for questions.
Thank you, Rachana. That was fantastic. I'm really excited about the integration with instruments and the automation. So yeah, we do have a few questions. First, we have one from Amit Charasia. So go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Rachana, excellent talk, and it's great to see Globus evolving the way it is. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, does Globus transfer the data over HTTP as well? And is there a HTTP endpoint now?
The short answer is yes. There is with Globus Connect Server version 5, all of these servers are enabled for both grid FTP and HTTP access. But I want to sort of little careful in the way you phrase it. Globus itself cannot do that transfer. It's a two-party transfer, but right. All the Globus storage systems are enabled for both, whether it's grid FTP or HTTPS with the new version.
So let me ask you this the other way. So does a client need to install something, or they can move the data freely from their web browser? Like the Globus Connect, is that required or not required now?
So you have to install Globus Connect Server. And then you could point a browser. You could do a direct get or put on it. Okay. It applies the same security policies as for bulk data transfer. So if you're required to authenticate, we would then prompt you to authenticate. If you're required to have permissions for the data, all that will be imposed, right? So the idea is that all the security and credential is still taken care of by Globus, but you could directly point a client and do two-party transfer.
Okay, thanks. I have another question, but I'll give a chance to others to ask, and then if there is time, I'll ask another.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Amit. So we now have a question from Mona Wong. So Mona, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. And that was a great presentation. I have a question basically about composing and using the flow. Is that done on AWS, on your system, or on our own system? I wasn't quite sure where this will be done.
Yeah, great question. So the flow service, the service that takes the definition of your flow and then ensures credentials are made and manages it, is all hosted by Globus. So you wouldn't do anything. You would write a client, you would use our client or write your own client that submits essentially a JSON document that says, here is my flow definition. This is the steps I want to do. Globus then goes through the flow and manages its execution. Each step of the execution is really one action, right? And that action could be anywhere. For example, if it's a Globus transfer action, it submits a job to the transfer service that we operate. If it is a job submit to Argonne Leadership Facility or an Exceed resource, then it's a job submit there, right? So the action provider can be run and hosted anywhere. I mean, we use AWS ourselves if it's something we run. But if you build your own, you could run it anywhere. There's a defined interface, and it needs to have it's a REST API essentially that then the flow service that we operate will call on your behalf.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Great, thanks, Mona. And then we have a question from Julian Oren, and he asked that I pose the question. So is there a repository with details for how to implement these processing pipelines while using in-house compute resources?
Great question. So we have a library, I guess, or samples of action providers that we can make available that shows you how you would wrap any task as an action provider. So we can certainly send you pointers to that. In addition, one of the action providers that another group at University of Chicago has developed, this is our labs group, the Globus Labs group, is a wrapper around a compute action, which is called FunkX, but they also just got funded by NSF for another 3 years to put that in production. And with that particular action provider, you could configure any compute, whether it's on your campus or elsewhere, as something that is available to the flow service for use. So I'm happy to send, maybe through Bob, pointers to both the sample repositories that shows you how to do that, how to build your own, and also to the compute one that has been used in all of the flows that I described today.
Great, thank you. And we have one more question from another one from Amit Charasia. So Amit, is this a fairly quick one?
I think, Rachana, how about if you have a moment, can you just respond on chat? I think
Sure.
We have another presenter as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, I'll do that. Thanks, everyone.
Great, again, thank you for the excellent presentation. So I'm going to turn things over to our second speaker. So Leo, go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, can you guys see my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm on the West Coast, so it's still morning. So my name is Chunhua Liao, so I go by the name Leo. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity and to talk about the work and we have been doing. So essentially, we are building source-to-source tools and for HPC. So before I go into some details, I would want to show some high-level big picture. So essentially, we are building combiner-based tools. So there are two kinds of combiners in our view. So we have a source-to-machine code combiner. We have source-to-source combiner. So as you can see, both they have very similar design. So you have code as input, you have front end, mid end, back end. The major difference is that traditional combiners, they generate machine code. So the source-to-source combiners, they generate source code as output. So some people may ask, why do you want to do things at the source level? So there are quite some benefits, actually. So the first one is very obvious, because source-to-source combiners and tools, they generate source code, so people can easily understand what's going on, what's being changed. And also, if you are not happy about the output, for traditional combiners, there's not much you can do because you have to understand the machine code. That's much harder. For source-to-source approach, you can actually modify the code further, so you can improve things, fix things further. And finally, the third benefit is that because the output is source code, you can actually compile and run the transformed code on multiple platforms. This is especially relevant for HPC because HPC platforms, they change hardware every few years, so you can preserve the source level optimizations and using source-to-source approach. The combiner we are building actually is called the rose combiner. So this name does not really mean anything special, it's just some kind of flower. And as you can see, we have very classic design for our source-to-source combiner, multiple front ends, supporting C, C++, Fortran. The mid-end really is this rose intermediate representation. It's also called the abstract syntax tree. Essentially, it has multiple nodes and edges to reflect what's in your source code. So the majority of our work is actually conducted on top of the AST. So we build a set of program analysis and the transformations. Then we expose those functionalities as library APIs, so people can build their own tools using those library APIs. So after that, you can call the backend. So you can either generate a source code, or you can generate binary executables. So the entire goal of this project is really to help critical applications in HPC, especially at Livermore Lab. We have quite some critical applications. So we want to make sure they actually, and they can always get the right results. That's for the correctness concern. The second big concern is we have to make sure and we have high productivity, because we often change our supercomputers. We have large scale applications. People don't want to rewrite their applications every 2 or 3 years. So we build a source-to-source tools to help migrate legacy codes from one platform to another. So from a high-level point of view, there are 2 kinds of tools we are building. So the first type is they are called analyzers. So they do not change your source code at all. They just generate interesting information from your source code. So as you can see, there are some visualization tools. And if you are using this roofline model, you can actually generate arithmetic intensity of your scientific computing loops. There are also tools trying to find all kinds of issues in your source code. So the second type of tools, they are called the translators. Those tools, they actually will change your source code somehow for the purpose of enabling some optimizations, to modernize some code, to refactor them, and so on. So one thing we found that interesting that originally we developed the translators to change the entire code, then give the code to the user, but the user don't really want to accept that code because they cannot easily see what's being changed. So right now we often actually use tools to generate patches. So those patches, they reflect the differences between the transformed code and the original code. So application developers, they can then check the patches and they really see what's going on. Then they can apply the patches, then they commit the changed code by themselves. So that's this kind of patching and is the way we deliver large scale transformations to the users. So due to time and constraint, I cannot elaborate all the tools. I do want to mention a few of them. The first one is called the AST Outliner. So hopefully most people in the audience understand the inlining already. Essentially, it's a classic compiler transformation to replace a function call with its body. So of course, this kind of transformation can eliminate the overhead of function calls. It will also enable program analysis and optimization, which otherwise could only work on single functions, because with inlining, you have the main function only. So many program analysis and transformation, they can be more easily done. In HPC right now, there's a big trend to use high-level C++ abstractions to enable productivity. For example, in C++, and there are template functions and with specializations, and in C++ 11, and there's this new feature called lambda expressions, and they are actually also called anonymous functions. So we are building the AST Outliner to actually inline, let's say, template functions and lambda expressions. So in the end, we can facilitate program understanding and to help both application developers and also compilers, so they can more easily understand the code and also enable more optimizations. So now you just see the internal steps we use to enable the inlining transformation. And roughly speaking, those 4 steps are kind of classic steps we use for many of our tools. Before doing any transformations, we first check if it's legal to do that transformation. And then we do some pre-processing or normalization or simplification, so the code can be more easily transformed. The third step is the main transformation. We actually replace the function call with its function body, then we replace the function and formal arguments with their corresponding and actual arguments. The last step we usually have is to do some post-processing to clean up the code a little bit better so it looks much better than the original form. Here I just want to show some examples for the input and output of the inliner. So this one, this code on the left side shows something called Raja. It's some kind of C++ library interface. This library interface exposes a set of template functions, execution policies, specializations. So the goal is really to separate different concerns of HPC. The template functions will actually combine them together. So what kind of execution policy you want to execute, the loop body, and what kind of iteration spaces you want to use for the computation. So three major concerns: execution policy, iteration space, and the actual computation. So with template specialization, let's say for this sequential execution policy, the lambda expression will be used to expand this kind of loop body. So in the end, you actually can use the same code base, but you just use different execution policies. So the same code base can be portable across, let's say, CPU execution, GPU execution, vectorizations. And this one is the simplest example I can come up with. This is some kind of Raja-like code. It's not really Raja. The real Raja code is much, much more complex. It calls this Raja for all template function and uses this sequential execution policy and specifying the iteration space for the loop from 0 to n. And then there's the C++11 lambda expression to specify the loop body. As you can see, if you have a lot of Raja codes using many different template functions, different execution policies, the code can be very confusing. But with the inlining transformation, we can actually transform this kind of HPC applications using high-level C++ abstractions into something much more understandable, like what you are seeing right now on the right side. So now you can say, oh, this is very familiar loop, and from the iteration 0 to something else, then we just do some transformation. So this is the use case where we are building for the inlining transformation. As you can see, this is still working in progress, but we do have some prototype released, so people can actually try this out and for this transformation. So the second tool I want to mention is called the AST Outliner. So I talked about the inlining. Now we are talking about the outlining. So they are actually semantically and reverse to each other. So the outlining transformation actually will extract a code portion into a separated function, and in the original place, it will replace the code segment with a call to that outliner function. So you may wonder, why would people want to have this kind of transformation? Interestingly, there are many use cases for the outlining transformation. For example, and for the OpenP transformation, if you want to generate multi-threaded CPUs or GPU code, you mostly have to use outlining. For example, you have this OMP for loop here with OMP parallel 4 as a pragma. Most OpenP compilers will actually outline this portion of loop into a separated outline function. And in the original place you can see there are some runtime library function calls. They are inserted. And this one, parallel start and runtime library function call, will actually start multiple threads and take a parameter. The parameter is the pointer to this outline function. Then each thread will actually execute this function. So this is how you implement multi-threaded CPU execution. And the AST Outliner can actually also generate CUDA kernel out of this OpenP function loop. So you can actually generate multi-threaded CUDA code also from the input OpenP code. So that's for the OpenP implementation. Another application scenario is to enable auto-tuning of whole applications. Quite often it's difficult to tune the entire code. You want to separate a big chunk of code into a separated function, so then you can focus on just auto-tuning that part of function. Again, we have some rather sophisticated algorithms internally, so I want to skip that. But we do have some user and command line options to fine-tune the internal behavior of this tool. For example, there are many different ways to pass variables into or outside of a function. You can pass them one by one, or you can wrap them into some data structure or array of pointers. So you can also generate the outlined function in the same source file, or you can generate the function in another new file. And there are two ways to call a function. You can call them using the traditional way to just like a C++ function call. And actually you can also use this DL open interface. So you can actually call the function through dynamically loadable libraries. So this is very flexible. It enables many large scale application optimizations because the main applications, they can still running, up and running, but we just change the dynamically loadable libraries so people can more or less do whatever they want for the library, but the original compiled code, they can still be intact and keep running. So internally, we developed quite some program analysis to improve the quality of all those tools. For this AST Outlining tool, there are two major optimizations we applied. The first one is to use scope analysis, side effect analysis, liveness analysis, so we can reduce the number of variables we want to pass in or out of the function, because some variables they don't have to be passed in or out of the function. So the second optimization we use is to reduce the Pointer-Dereferencing, because when you do the outlining, especially in C programs, you want to preserve the pass by reference semantics. The way to implement that is really to use pointer types and pointer dereferencing, but the code would look much worse. Let's say one concrete example showing the classic outlining algorithm generating some kind of functions with a lot of pointer types in the function parameter list, and a lot of pointer dereferencing inside of the function body. And also, if you count the number of parameters, there are 8 parameters. So that's what you get from the classic outlining algorithm. In our tool, because we used quite some program analysis, we actually can reduce the number of parameters in this function parameter list. There's only 5 parameters right now. And also, if you look carefully for this generated function body, as you can, if you are familiar with the code, this is the classic stencil Jacobi code. This function body looks much more friendly to both programmers and also compiler or other tools. So the bottom line that with advanced program analysis, and our tool can generate higher quality for the output code. So both programmers and the backend compilers or third-party tools, they can do some further work, optimization. So it is much better than the other alternatives. Okay, the third tool I want to briefly mention is called the Move tool. This one is kind of interesting because at Livermore, we had quite some MPI scientific applications, but they did not have, let's say, OpenP directives to take advantage of multi-core or GPU devices. So they came to us asking us if we could develop some tools to help the parallelization of their code. They found that they had a lot of global scoped variables in their applications. So they say, well, can you develop some tools to help this? Yeah, we say, yeah, we try. Then we actually developed this move tool to move variable declarations into their innermost possible scopes. So to reduce the number of global scoped variables and also to facilitate code parallelization. Because once you move many variables, for example, inside of the loops, then you don't really have to declare or handle them as shared variables. So that can actually also improve the performance of your application. So the requirement initially sounded very simple, but we actually had to go through several iterations of our algorithm and implementation to really get make our users happy. So in the first case, we just built this kind of scope tree indicating the declaration and user scope, and then you can easily move variable declarations to this like a bottom scope tree. So in other cases, there may be multiple user scopes along the path in the tree. So you can only move to, let's say, the intermediate user scope. And quite often you have branches in your scopes. Then you have to be careful to say if between those, among those branches, if there are some values transferring. If there's no value transferred, then you can actually move variable declarations to the bottom scope. So otherwise, if there are some values, let's say this code block and this code block, if those two scopes, they have some kind of value and written and read, then you cannot really move the declaration to the bottom. You can only move the variable to the first branching node in this scope tree. And we also found that once you move things around, it opens up new opportunities to move the variable further. Let's say in your first iteration, you moved some variables into those two scopes. Then actually for this, for the variable in this scope, it can be moved down further. So we actually revised our algorithm to use some iterative algorithm and to actually enable this kind of iterative movement until no further movements are necessary. And in the final version, we found that we actually don't have to move the variable for each iteration. What's really needed is we first find all the bottom scopes. Each variable declaration should be moved to. Then finally, we do this copy and move in one shot. So we separate the analysis and transformation into two different stages. Now our tool is much more efficient. So this one just shows some internal details of how difficult or interesting or simplest tool you can actually deal with. And in the end, the users are very happy, but the consequence is that they just keep asking for more. So that's the good and the bad side of doing good job of developing tools. So I don't have too much time left. Then I will quickly mention some other work we have been doing. So the first thing I want to mention is the benchmarking. So after developing so many tools, I think the lesson is if you cannot measure it correctly, you cannot improve it. So that's why we are a big fan of developing regression tests for all our tools. And we also actually open source and share many of our regression tests and to the tool community so people can easily use our internal tests to test their own tools. So we actually developed this data risk bench and to evaluate all data risk bench and detection tools. And we generated quite some interesting results for some state-of-the-art tools. So if you are interested, there's some kind of dashboard to show the state-of-the-art for data risk detection. And based on our benchmark we released. So the second lesson we learned that not a single tool can handle all the challenges. So we are exploring the idea of how to compose multiple tools into cloud-based services. And as you can see this figure, we are building some kind of meta service for data risk detection. Internally, it calls microservices. Each microservice actually wraps some one individual data risk detection tools, and with different policies, we can actually combine potentially conflicting results from multiple tools, and in the end, we can generate better metrics compared to if we are just using individual tools. So this is a tool composition idea we are exploring. So finally, we actually have like 10 plus staff members. Some are full-time on this project, others they have like a percentage of time working with us. We also have, let's say, summer interns, every summer 5 to 10 students and working with me and other co-workers. We found that training them, the new members, the new students can be very time consuming. So we are setting up this freecompilercamp.org. It's kind of a web browser based training platform. So people can easily get their hands dirty. So just trying out tools and trying out how to hack into tools with the built-in online sandbox. You don't have to install anything. Okay, I think that concludes my talk. Those are the takeaway messages. So we are building the tools. We are big fan of defining metrics, and we are also doing quite some supportive work. So with that, I think I will end my talk and just accept some questions.
Great, thank you so much, Leo. Excellent presentation. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. So we have one from Yang Wine at PSC. Go ahead.
Does this tool support the Fortran language?
Yes, it has the Fortran and front end. And the caveat is that we have more C++ applications than Fortran applications. So many tools, we develop them to support C++ first. Then if there are Fortran users, then and we get some funding, then we extend the tools to support Fortran.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and we have another question from Kenneth Yashimoto here in San Diego. So Kenneth?
Yeah, I might have missed it, but I was just wondering, these transformations, how much are they allowed to change the program such that the output from the new source is different from what the old program would have output?
I think this depends on the user requirements. We can do as simple as a variable replacement, but that's not the best use of our framework. And we can also do this outlining. As you can see, the changes to the code is dramatic. The fundamental rule is that we only modify the portions of code users want to us to modify, and we keep the rest of the code intact. So the code should be more familiar, similar to the original code if there's no transformation on specific code regions.
Great, thank you, Kenneth. Do we have any more questions? And if not, I'm going to ask one. So with traditional compilers, when we go, say, from level 02 to 03, that enables additional optimizations that may not necessarily preserve floating point identities. Of course, you know, with that, the order of math operations matters. So the kinds of transformations that you allow in the source-to-source transformations, do you limit them to only those changes that are guaranteed not to change floating point results, or do you allow those and flag them?
Yeah, that's one very interesting question. So because the entire workflow you already kind of noticed is kind of collaboration between source-to-source level transformation and the binary level transformation. So ideally there should be some synchronization or collaboration. And the transformations we enable, they do not really want to change, let's say, floating point accuracy or precision. but we do have some kind of, let's say, a translator. It's called a type forge. It will actually change the floating point types from, let's say, 64 bits to 32 bits. So with that transformation, you can reduce the precision, but then you will gain some performance and save some energy. So as this shows that it's really specific to the transformations and you ask for. So if the transformation will impact the floating point operations, then you get what you want. If not, it won't be changed.
Great, thank you. And I'm checking the chat. I don't see any more questions. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in the mix. So do we have any last questions for Leo?
I have a quick one, if it's possible. That's about a website that you made. This is David Del Vento from Anchor. So that's about a website that you mentioned that you can try things there instead of installing. Can you maybe say a little more? What exactly can you do there? And
yeah, sure, definitely. And this is like a browser-based sandbox environment. It has terminals inside of this browser. We have tools compiler installed already inside of this sandbox. So you only need internet connection and a web browser, then you immediately get access to this sandbox environment. So you can try out our tools. And we actually also have tutorials. As you can see, this web page has 2 panels. The left side is the instructions. Right panel actually is a real sandboxed terminal environment. You can try to hack into the compiler's tools or do any kind of experiments you want. We actually teamed up with 2 universities. We have professors teaching compiler or tool HPC courses. They found this kind of an online sandbox environment is very friendly for students and new people to try out compilers and tools.
Thank you very much. That's exactly why I asked.
Yeah, and if you go to this website, it's live. Yeah, already. And last year we submitted a poster about this work to supercomputing. The poster was nominated as the best research poster, but not the real final one. But that's still something. I'm very happy to.
I was a supercomputing, but I missed that talk. Sorry, but thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we're now 3 minutes past the hour. Again, thank you so much to our 2 outstanding speakers. That was fantastic. But both of you are doing some really impressive work. So with that, we're going to wrap things up and hope to see you all in. Actually, sorry, no symposium in July because of the conflict with PERC conference. But then see you all in August. All right, thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you.